So today we'll talk about our intro to quadrilaterals from our note sheet that you will be given in class today, and we'll just follow along with that. One thing that you will need is you should get out a pencil, and you should also get out either a protractor, ruler, some type of straight edge that will allow you to draw some shapes. So first thing we should do is let's look at quadrilaterals, and you should know that a quadrilateral from our last unit, or our last little part of this unit, is a four-sided polygon. So let's look at this flowchart. The flowchart here is going to be all different types of quadrilaterals. So the first thing we would expect is to have quadrilaterals at the top. And as we go through the sheet, the next thing, so question 1 says parallelogram, kites, and trapezoids are types of what? And those are types of quadrilaterals. And we're going to write those down in order from left to right. So parallelograms will go first here. And then we have kites. And then we have trapezoids. And then we continue. So two different types of parallelograms will be rhombus or rhombi, which is the plural of that, and rectangles. And we'll go more into detail about what each of those are in a little while, but for right now we're just writing the different types. And finally, to fill out this parallelograms branch of this tree, what is a rhombus and also a rectangle? Well, that would be a square. So we have now filled out the parallelogram branch. Also, the kite branch is filled out. So finally, we're left with these trapezoids, and there's two different types of trapezoids. Try to think of what those might be. So the two different types of trapezoids is we'll have right trapezoids, and we'll also have isosceles trapezoids. And that's a C there. I apologize to make it look like an E. So we can change that, but C, E. Okay. And now what I want you to do is we're going to go through and just draw the different types and look at the definitions. So here, a quadrilateral, a polygon with four sides. So take a minute, and pause the video if you want to, and draw a quadrilateral. So there we go, I drew mine. It is this arrow-looking shape, and that is actually a concave, quadrilateral, because one of the diagonals, a line going from vertex to vertex, would lie outside of the polygon. So, now let's keep going. So now, a parallelogram, a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel. So, think of, let's try to draw a parallelogram. So, again, pause the video if you want to draw this parallelogram, but I'm going to keep going. So, I'm drawing two lines that are parallel. It might not be perfect, but and then connect them. And remember, all of these are quadrilaterals, so they have to have four sides. There we go. One more side here. And it says both pairs of sides, of opposite sides, are parallel. So when we look, we need both pairs of sides to be parallel. Well, how do we denote parallel lines? That is by putting a triangle on these lines. So here, that tells me those lines going horizontally are parallel. And now we have a set of vertical lines that are also parallel. So these need to get two arrows because we don't want to confuse what two sides are parallel with each other, in case drawings aren't to scale. So there is a basic parallelogram. And I also tried to draw a parallelogram that was not a rhombus and not a rectangle. So now let's go down. So now we want to draw a rhombus that is not a square. Because remember, squares are part of rhombuses, so let's look. A rhombus that is not a square. Well, a rhombus is a parallelogram with all sides congruent. So what would that look like? Well, actually, again, pause the video to draw this, but it's going to look like a diamond. So all of those sides are congruent. The two sides opposite each other are still parallel, but now all sides are congruent. So it would look like that kind of diamond. And it's denoted, you know it's a rhombus because there's markings on every side showing that every side is congruent. So, now that we have that, let's look at rectangle. A rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. So take a second, pause the video to draw a rectangle. There is my rectangle, right? So rectangle, 4 sides, and I need to have 4 right angles. So how is that denoted? Well, as you should remember, that's denoted by putting these little squares in every corner, telling me that all of those are 90-degree angles. And there you go. So as we move on, now we're to square. A square is a parallelogram that has 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles. So take a second to draw and label those. So there we have my square. And again, just like the rectangle, well, it needs to be 4 right angles. So 4 squares put in the corner of this square, telling me each of those angles is 90 degrees. And then because it's also a rhombus, and that means that each side, all the sides are congruent, there needs to be tick marks on every side. Now let's look at a kite. I'm sure you've seen a kite or been able to draw one, so I know that you can draw it on your own, so try that for a moment. So this is the kite that I have drawn here. We see that we have 2 pairs of adjacent sides, that means next to each other, are congruent. So the 2 up top are congruent, and the 2 below are congruent. But no pairs of opposite sides are congruent. That means this top side here can't be congruent to the one opposite it. And so how we denote that, remember, is congruency is denoted by tick marks on the sides. So I'll have 1 pair with 1 tick mark and 1 pair of sides with 2 tick marks. Now let's look at a trapezoid, a quadrilateral with exactly 1 pair of sides parallel. So why don't you take a second to draw that as I draw mine. So I would have 2 parallel lines, and I'm going to try to make mine very obvious that they're parallel and that these 2 other sides, that none of those sides are congruent. So in there we need 1 pair of parallel sides. 1 pair of parallel sides. Now let's look at a right trapezoid. So a right trapezoid is a trapezoid that will have 2 right angles. So try to draw that on your own. So as I'm drawing my trapezoid, I still need to have 2 lines, or a pair of lines that are parallel, which I do, right, with these 2. But then I also need to have 2 right angles. Well, I have that here on this side, so that is a right trapezoid. And then finally here, underneath that, we have this isosceles trapezoid. So finally take a second to pause the video and try to draw an isosceles trapezoid. So here's an isosceles trapezoid. Again, we have two parallel lines, but in addition to that, this time we also have the non-parallel lines are congruent, so they would need tick marks. So I know that this is, I'll redraw that arrow so we don't get confused since it was a poorly drawn arrow, but there we go. So that should complete the worksheet that we were working on. It also shows you all the different types of quadrilaterals that we'll talk about in this class, and now you should be able to work on the other worksheet that you will be given, worksheet 6A, that is also your homework for tonight, and I will see you in class tomorrow.